Hello and welcome to everyone joining us this morning for the Freeway to Recovery Back to Business event. Hope you've got yourself a coffee and something to eat. And I'm Matt Adderton, and I'm very happy that you've taken the time to tune in today. And look, we've got a great host today, being Gus Worland from Gotcha for Life. And we've got a couple of guests, being Kath Koschel from the Kindness Factory and former Northern Beaches Area Police Commander Dave Darcy. So they've all donated their time today, which we appreciate. Look, before we get and introduce Gus, I just wanted to give you a brief background on the event today, and wanted just to sort of firstly say, what do I know about mental health and dealing with mental health? To be honest with you, not much. I know I've personally felt the effects of it, but not sure if it was what it was at the time. And look, I definitely know I did not deal with it the best way I could have or should have. And I did try to deal with it myself, which I thought it'd just be okay, is probably what I thought. But now knowing what I do know, I know I should have dealt with it better. And I really thank my wife who was there for me. So that's something that really I have learned quite a bit. And over the past 20 odd years, I've been an employee, I've run companies on people's behalf. And for the last 15 years, I've run my own business here on the Northern Beaches. So I really thought that I'm really keen to do what I can to, I suppose, grow awareness of this. But one thing that Gus always says, that awareness is great, but I do believe that we do need to act. And this is part of what I believe is starting to act on it from my point of view. And I hope today really helps people as much as possible. So look, my personal experience is that I really think that no matter what your role in business or an employee or whatever it might be, we all have a level of responsibility, we have pressure, we have a number of things, and combine that with family pressures and family commitments and friends pressures and friends commitments, as well as trying to grab a little bit of time to yourself. It all adds up, no matter how big or small. It is all something that we need to address and work with. So on top of that, you throw in 2 years of COVID, you throw in 3 lockdowns, and I believe, to be honest with you, it's okay to feel a little flat at the moment. And the feedback I'm receiving that after talking to local business people is exactly that there's a little bit of people feeling flat and a little bit of uncertainty. So today's all about, as we start to open back up, start heading down the freeway to recovery, it's a great time to get our mind back into the game and focus on mental fitness, resilience for the journey ahead. And our guests today, I think, are excellent, and they've got a lot of experience in the challenges that you go through in life, and then recovering, and then on top of that, developing resilience and initiating and developing strategies to be able to cope. So I really think that today's going to be a great day. Now, one thing just to cover off before we hand over to Gus is that we did promote previously that we would have had Ross Jones and Jim Kelly on. And unfortunately, due to, I suppose, they've had to reluctantly pull out due to some circumstances that are out of all our control. So it's a little disappointing, because I do believe that Ross's story from, I suppose, where he's been, the journey he's been on to where he is now is amazing. And Jim has also worked on a lot of mental health work safe resources, which has been awesome. But they are public, and we will share them at the end of today's. We'll send them out to everyone on from an email point of view. So want to sort of like let everyone know there's also a Q&A at the end of this. So please, by all means, send through any questions. We'll try and get to as many as possible in the Q&A session with Dave, Kath, and Gus. So send them through. We'll do our best. And if we don't get to them today, we'll also make sure that we do come back to you on that as much as possible. So right now, I want to bring Gus Worland on from Gotcha for Life, and let him take over from here, because, look, I really appreciate your time. Gus, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, Matt. Thank you very much, mate.
And I'll throw you over to chatting maybe a little bit, introduce Gotcha for Life to people, and then bringing Kath on board. But I'm going to step out of here and let you get on with it.
No worries at all, mate.
Thank
you very much. Much appreciated. I'd also just like to start with the acknowledgement of country. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land. I pay respect to the elders past, present and emerging, for they hold the memories, the traditions and the culture of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people across the nation. Thank you so much, Matt, for that lovely introduction, and thanks for showing a little bit of vulnerability there about what you've been going through. My name's Gus Worland. I spent over 10 years on breakfast radio, and then I was lucky enough about 6 years into that breakfast radio stint at Triple M to be able to change the content of our show one day and talk about something which was really vulnerable to me and show some emotion. And I, off the back of that, was able to get some funding together to do a show called Man Up, which hopefully some of you have watched. If you haven't, it's still available on ABC iView. And that was all about challenging masculinity in this country. And that really changed my path in my world, because I went from sort of doing radio full-time to full-time running a foundation, which is all about mental fitness for boys, girls, men, women, and everyone in between, sort of making sure that we don't worry alone and giving each other the tips and tricks to be able to have that conversation of gravity outside of banter where we're very, very comfortable. So when Matt asked me to come on board and have a chat today, it was really about, I suppose, helping the Northern Beaches, because we have been through, like everyone else, a very difficult last couple of years. And what a wonderful way to start a day with a cup of tea, a bit of toast, and to listen to some people that might be able to give us some answers, some tips and tricks, some ways to be able to get through this moving forward now that we've had Freedom Day and we're starting to open up again. So I'll be chatting to Kath Koschel, who's one of my great friends and someone who's got a beautiful story and is always doing things for others. And then Dave's coming on board, who used to be the Commissioner of Police on the Northern Beach. He's an absolute champion. And Dave and I have known each other for a long time. He's always been focused on mental fitness, and he's got some tips as well for all the small businesses out there and anyone that's listening this morning that might be able to help us move forward. Because as Matt said, there is some people out there that are very focused at the moment on the future, but there's also a little bit of uncertainty. So, you know, an hour getting, like I say, some hints to be able to get through stuff, I think is wonderful. So that's enough about me. I'd like to bring Kath on now and to have a chat to her about what she's doing, how she keeps her mind so fresh, and how she's so kind. How are you, Kath? Good morning to you.
Hey, Gussie. Yeah, I'm good. Thanks so much for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. For people that don't know you, I know this is a difficult thing for you to do, to talk about in such a small amount of time, but could you give the 2-3 minute version of your story, and then we can go into the Kindness Factory and the work that you're doing?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so when I was a little girl, just had one dream. I'm from a really tiny country town, and that was to play cricket for Australia. So really had to grind my way to get close to that goal, just because I guess what I lacked in skill and natural ability, I had to make up for it with hard work, grit and determination when everyone told me I wouldn't get there. So I fast-tracked my uni degree, went and played for Middlesex in the UK, then got the call up to come and represent New South Wales. And this dream that I've been dreaming since a young girl had started to come true. And 4 games into my professional career as a New South Wales breaker, very suddenly and tragically, I broke my back. So I was left paralysed, told I'd never walk again, clinical paralysis diagnosis, all that kind of stuff. And a whole series of surgeries that were really unsuccessful and post-op complications sort of saw me come very close to having my left leg amputated, which then led me to a rehabilitation journey. So I got told I'd never walk, but the best chance that I had at ever having some form of independence in life was to go to rehab. So 6 to 12 months, pack up your life, quit your job, all that kind of stuff. So off to rehab I went, and really tough and vulnerable time for me. I was 23 at the time. All I'd ever really cared about was cricket. And there I was, surrounded by the elderly and having to make friends with 85-year-old war veterans and things like that, which taught me a whole lot about life and perspective and life that didn't exist just solely focused on cricket. But my luck actually changed for the good. About 4 weeks into my stay, I met a fellow patient who was a very similar age, mindset, had an athletic background as well. His name was Jim. And it's a little bit funny, but we found love in rehab. We ended up falling in love not long after, I guess, meeting. Which was a really beautiful beautiful time for me. So what Jim and I did to make our time and recoveries a little bit more bearable in that rehab environment was we dreamt a life that would exist outside of rehab. So 4 kids, you know, house in Broadwater on the Gold Coast, pet turtles, dogs, all that kind of stuff. And for me, I actually felt quite grateful that I broke my back about 3 months into our relationship, sort of reflecting, thinking, you know, I have lost this dream, but I've found love, which is far greater than that dream of playing cricket. Very tragically, about 12 months after our relationship began and our life was about to start outside of that rehab environment, Jim very suddenly took his own life, so suicide, and left me at the age of 24 feeling quite lost, as you can imagine. I lasted about 10 months after his passing before, I guess, the enormity of life really hit me like a ton of bricks. So first I lost this dream that I'd been dreaming since I was a little girl, and then I lost the person who taught me that there was so much more to life than cricket and hitting a ball around the park, and it just crushed me beyond belief. And in that very vulnerable time in my life, I think I turned to 2 things that I can really highlight right now. And they were gratitude. So I remember sitting down at a coffee table, getting out a pen and writing down a list of names of people who had helped me in my life and going through a process of calling them just to thank them for being part of my life. And the second thing was kindness, and how I articulate how I came up with that kind of notion, or why it was so powerful and important to me, is, you know, when you're in a wheelchair like I have been and you can't reach a lift button and a random stranger walks past and they press that button and it means nothing to their day, but it means everything to yours. Those moments can be so powerful. And I encourage anyone on this call to give someone that kindness anytime that you find that opportunity. Don't steer away from it because you're feeling, you know, again, vulnerable or anything like that, or afraid. Approach it with curiosity and give it a crack, because I guarantee it might not change your life, but it'll change someone else's. And so with that, this movement, I guess, upon reflection, was born, where I just wanted to pay forward the kindness that I'd received through all these people doing things for me when I was in my time of need, I guess. And very accidentally, you know, raised a ton of money for different and various charities and all those sorts of things. And then actually landed myself back in rehab just for a routine checkup, all that kind of stuff. And the doctors basically said, look, mate, you've done really well. We're ready to discharge you for life. On your way. Any questions? I said, I've got one. I miss cricket. I can't play it anymore. I can't feel my left leg. Anything else that you could prescribe that I might be able to do? And I said, yeah, I've got one question. They basically said, your recovery is based in a pool and on a bike, add in a run. You could be a para-triathlete. Is that something that you consider? I said, it is. So I signed up for a tester, loved that. First person with my disability to do a half Ironman, qualified for a full Ironman to be done in May 2016. Training's on track, fittest I've ever been in my life. 4 months out from the event, with my 2 best mates, I go for a bike ride, nearly at the halfway mark, and a drunk driver cleaned me up from behind. I broke my back again, this time in 4 places, dislocated my neck, broke my wrist, shattered my left hip, and woke up 2 weeks later from a coma to the news that I was paralyzed and told that I'd never ever walk again for the second time in my life. Really tough to bounce back from those experiences again. And it's a detailed story that we don't have time for today. But the most amazing thing happened when I was in that coma. I guess people recognized that I'd been doing things within the community, kindness, acts of kindness. And they decided that they, I guess, saw that I no longer could do that from that coma in that hospital bed. So they started writing to me. So when I woke up from this coma, I had hundreds of thousands of people from all around the world who had sent me acts of kindness. Thanks, Kath, for the inspiration. Because of you today, I mowed my neighbour's lawn, or I donated blood, etc., etc. And so I flipped the website, and my life sort of, I guess, changed after that recovery, whereby I just then started traveling the world, sharing my story with as many people as possible, so that as much kindness as possible would exist. So Kindness Factory now exists in 3 countries, which is absolutely fantastic. And I guess our sole purpose as a charity more so is to try and inspire the young generation, or the next generation of kids, to grow with kindness, which also promotes resilience and mental fitness and all those sorts of things as well. But I think that's longer than 3 minutes, Gussie, but I've tried my best to get it in as quickly as possible.
Look, it's a beautiful story. It's a tragic story. It's a lovely story. It's all those emotions in one. And I've heard you on the long version, but I've heard that small version probably way too many times, because I don't like to rush you, because you do have so much to say. But about the Kindness Factory, how many millions of acts of kindness have now been logged on your website, let alone the ones that people do and just forget about now that they're in a mindset of helping people? Like you say, the very small little thing for someone is such a big thing for someone else.
Yeah, absolutely. There's 2.8 million acts of kindness. So when I was in that hospital bed and people started sending me all their acts, I set a very audacious goal, which I thought I'd never reach. I had a full-time job at the time, and that was to reach 1 million. And last year in April, we cracked that. Interestingly for this call, I think, and very relevant, we actually noticed our website hits and acts of kindness go up by 57% on average throughout all of the lockdown periods, certainly within Australia. So I think what that really highlighted to me was that, I guess, through adversity sometimes is a very good opportunity for kindness, and we know that it makes us feel good. And I think scientifically, you know, if my story hasn't inspired or whatever, and you still don't think that you should go out and give kindness or receive it, we know that when we're in a kind state, so i.e. we're giving or receiving kindness, we're in the most oxytocin state that we can be. So that's the feel-good chemical that runs through your brain. I'm not really smart enough to be saying this, but it was written down somewhere, so I'm going to reiterate. And we know that floods the body with so many things that add into resilience and mental fitness and allow that baseline platform for us to be out thriving as community members. And so I think that was really paramount for us to recognize and stop and reflect and go, wow, 57% increase. And there's been close to 3 million people all around the world doing this. For me, that just really, I guess, highlights the importance of kindness and the depth of it as well.
Yeah, I think everyone slowed down enough, didn't they, in that 18 months of lockdown to go, you know what, I might have enough time now to do something a little bit different. And that's what we've certainly found at Gotcha for Life as well, that people are now more focused on their village, the people that absolutely make you get up in the morning, the people you love and adore and you cannot imagine living without. We're taking a bit more time now to look after them. And I suppose your thing is not only look after them, but just those little bits of random kindness can really help someone else, because you just don't know what sort of day people are having. You know, that old saying of walk a mile in someone else's shoes, never been more important. And it just, you slow down enough to realize, take ego out, and then you can actually do a really nice act for someone else.
Yeah, absolutely. And a story I didn't get to tell, and I think, all of these micro stories add into why I'm so passionate about kindness, but also why I'm so passionate about Gotcha as well, Gussie. Just to let everyone know, I am a very proud ambassador of Gotcha for Life, and Gus and I met a few years ago. But if I can tell this one story, and I think it really highlights the importance of the village that you refer to, and since we've been chatting more about that, Gus, I've reconnected with all of my village and thriving again, which is amazing. And I needed that reminder. But when I was in rehab and looking at a 12-month stint ahead of me, which was a really overwhelming thought for me as a really young, fit punk of a kid surrounded by the elderly, I remember calling my best mate, who I'm more than happy being vulnerable with when I need to be, and had tears streaming down my face. And I said, look, you got to come pick me up. I don't really care what happens from a health perspective, but I can't do this. I really don't care. If it means I don't walk again, then so be it. I just can't stay in this environment. And I'll never, ever forget what she said to me. And we talk about it a lot. And I think it really highlights the importance of having people in your life who know how to have your back when you can't seem to figure out how to have your own. She simply said this. It was, Kath, I won't come pick you up. I'll come visit. And I promise you that you can call me at any hour of the day. I really don't care. I'll pick up that phone and I'm going to walk this journey side by side and support you. But I won't come pick you up because I know that is the place that you need to be to get better. And with that, it was really tough love, but I really needed to hear it. And it was a tough conversation for her to have when I'm pretty sure that every ounce of her being would have been saying, I just need to go and hug her and cuddle her and pick her up and take her out of that environment. But she didn't. She told me the hard truth that I needed to hear, and it set me on my way. And for me, that's a story I can tell on behalf of Gotcha to really showcase the importance of mateship and having those people that really know how to have your back. And it's so important to me. Having people who believe in me is something that's it's an ingredient in my life that I couldn't do without, put it that way.
Look, absolutely. And thank you for sharing that so much, Kath. And before I talk to Dave Darcy, who obviously has been a policeman all his life and has done amazing work, I just want to go through that village piece with you, Kath, because everyone can do it at home now with us, whether you're at the office or you're sitting down. It's quite an easy thing to do, but something easy stuff or simple stuff we tend not to do. We tend to complicate things around mental health and mental fitness, where really it gets down to being as basic and simple as possible. So before I start there is a Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom where you can ask questions, and we'll get that Q&A at the end when Matt will come back on and take us through Q&A, and that will be with myself, Kath, as well as Dave Darcy. So please write any questions you have in that Q&A bar at the bottom of the Zoom technology bits and bobs. So get a pen and paper and write down a list of people that you love and adore that you cannot imagine living your life without. Now, it might take you a minute or two. It might take you more than that. And you might come back to that list during the day and scrub a name out and put another name in. It doesn't matter how big that list is or how small that list is. It's just a reminder to you, and this is what Kath and I have been doing. It's a reminder to you to make sure that you don't take those relationships for granted. They're the most important people in your world. Work shouldn't get in front of it. Life shouldn't get in front of them. This is your moment to really step up to the plate and go, you know what? Am I doing enough to make sure that the people that I love and adore know that I've got their back, know that I'm there for them? Because we don't want anyone worrying alone, especially coming out of lockdown now after so much uncertainty. People at the moment may be thinking everyone else is happy, I should be happy as well, but it may not be the case. So find that village, that list of people that you're going to write down right now. That is your village. Make sure you write down your village and let them know how you're feeling and let them know what you think about them. And the best way to do that is to use technology, because technology has stood the test of time over the last 18 months. The fact that we're all here on Zoom now, the fact that you can FaceTime someone, you can send them a text message, send them a meme, send them a funny joke. We can stay connected, and connection is the absolute key. We are only physically isolated. We're not emotionally. So let people know how you're thinking about them using technology. So write down that list of names, like I said, and then give yourself a mark out of 10 for how you're performing within that relationship. So that's why putting on your sort of your honesty hat and saying, you know what, how am I looking after my partner? How am I looking after my kids? How am I looking after the people that I love the most in the world? And it's a really easy, simple thing to do. But over the next hour or so, you can just start jotting stuff down on the bit of paper and saying, you know what, I haven't actually caught up with that person for a while. I haven't told them lately how much I love them. I haven't told them lately that I've been thinking about them. What you want with your tribe, your village, you need to let them know that you're connected and that you absolutely love them. So Kath and I have been doing that, and it's been great for me. I sent it to all my mates as well, Kath, and I had them all come back and go, you know what? I don't want to tell you who my list is because there's some people on there that you wouldn't expect, and I didn't put some people on there as well. That's the other thing. A lot of people didn't put their parents down, for instance, because that's not their village at the moment. Whatever they're going through in their life, these are the people that are important. These ones are sort of in the B team. That's okay, isn't it, to sort of give into that and to work out who your tribe is properly from your heart.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and I think at very different moments within our life, we have different villages, right? So sometimes people are more appropriate and less. So no judgment. I think it's just who do you immediately think of, and that'll guide you and be the answer for sure.
Absolutely. We had Grant Simpson. Grant, we did see your hand go up, but what we'll do is we'll do the Q&A at the end. So if you can jot your question in the Q&A bar, hopefully you can do that. That would be fantastic because we don't want to not answer any questions. Kath, thank you. If I could get you to mute and take your camera off just for the time being, and I'll come back in a moment. And Dave Darcy, if you could put your camera on and unmute yourself. Dave, hello. You've been an absolute legend all your life. How's retirement going before we get into your tips and tricks on how to get through what we're going through at the moment?
Well, I'm going to start with a tip and trick, Gus. I always said to my staff, when you finish policing, a lot of police, you know, they tend to just fade away really quickly. They lose meaning in life. And I used to always say to people of my staff, I used to say, you do policing as a tour of duty. It's a tour of duty, and it has a bookend to it. And you've got to reflect as you're coming up to the end of that. You've got to reflect on that and look back and go, well, you know, I did that all right. And so, yeah, retirement was interesting. I had probably 3 weeks of really intense grief, and then it just went away. And I thought, no, I've got to practice what I preach. That concept of tour of duty was really important to me. And and I put my money where my mouth is. And I've got to say, I don't think I'm driving Sonia mad, but it may be. But I certainly pivoted. As you can see, Mad TV's taken off, and I'm an editor in a magazine as well. But yeah, and most importantly, I'm a grandfather now, so that's great.
That is fantastic. Well, you look really well. When you say you put your money where your mouth with it, and so forth, that 3 weeks of grief, did you take that on yourself because that's sort of the way that you felt you should do, or have you been able to express it to people to make sure?
Oh no. Like, I'd never heard. It's interesting, you know. I thought I knew a lot about this, and then I just heard Kath and this idea of a village, and I'd never heard that before. And yeah, I didn't know it, but I had my own village of which I used to express that and talk about that. And that's a thing with middle-aged blokes. I mean, we have a tendency not to talk about our feelings. And yeah, no, I think that was I think it was 50% my own mindset and 50% a little bit of a push. Yeah, and that's what got me through. But I was quite surprised. I have surprised. I thought it'd be longer. And I've known a lot of police, you know, long-term police, that it was longer. But yeah, no, I'm happy with that.
That's fantastic. Your focus, I suppose, has always been on building community resilience. That's been a big part of what you're all about. Can you tell everyone about that and give us any tips and tricks that you've picked up, you know, through your policing and after policing about, you know, something that we can perhaps write down alongside the village to sort of go, you know what, that's something I can think about moving forward, because we're all coming out of this period. It's a little bit unknown still, but there's some happiness in a lot of people. A lot of people have done it tougher than others. So what's your advice?
Yeah, the first thing I'm going to say right at the start is don't switch up. This is not just cop stuff. This is basically, I ran a business. That's what I ran, you know, 300 staff. You know, it's no different to a business. Yeah, it's in public, but it's a public service role. But at the end of the day, the same challenges you have in business are the same. So I just want to get that out so people appreciate that. I think the first takeaway message is we all know people who are intelligent. They've got IQ, right? Now, IQ you're born with. You can't change it. You're either smart or you're not, and you've got to know where you sit in that. But there's this other thing, and we've always known that some people are incredibly smart, but just don't pick up visual cues from people or don't read the room right. And that's the thing called emotional intelligence. Now, the good thing about emotional intelligence is you can alter that through knowledge. You can build your emotional intelligence. You can become more caring. You can become more vigilant about looking at people's facial expressions and seeing how they're going and how they're holding themselves. I mean, at the end of the day, non-verbal communication, that's our primary way in which mammals, you know, interact. And then, you know, the language can say something completely opposite. I mean, we see that with politicians all the time. It's great watching them on TV squirm and move about because the two are a dissonance and they just can't do it. And everyone goes, gotcha. So that's the first thing is you can build it. Now, the next point to that is if you can build your emotional intelligence as an individual, then you can build a collective emotional intelligence. And once you do that, then what follows is we move into resilience. And that's I guess what I learned along the journey of suicide prevention was there are a number of courses in Lifeline, and I'll just read them out, but you can get these on Lifeline Northern Beaches site. There's a mental health and wellbeing course. There's a accidental counsellor course, and there's a number of courses that can be scripted for your particular organisation. Now, when I say organisation, you might have a deli with 3 people in it. You know, you might be a hairdresser. I mean, hairdressers are probably the most emotionally intelligent people we have on this earth. They do a lot of counselling, you know. They're accidental.
A lot of listening.
They do a lot of listening. Yeah, so you can actively build the resilience of your team, of your group or yourself or your partners by just getting some knowledge and listening. And you know, I've walked away with a bag full of stuff from Kath today that, you know, you think you know it, and then you go, oh, well, hang on, that's another way of dealing with it. So that's the thing. I think the other point is everyone's going, oh, well, COVID's lifted now. My view is, I think we did it pretty well in our age group. You know, I've hit 60, you know, right on that edge of baby boomer. We had it pretty well. We had it pretty good. I'm looking at the next generations, and I think it's going to be far more challenging. And, you know, I don't think COVID's over. And in terms of the effect it's having on small business, I mean, they've still got the financial ramifications of this. And this is another area where Lifeline Northern Beaches comes into account. They have financial counselling services, and they also have free psychological counselling services with a proper accredited psychologist. So on the Northern Beaches, that's Lifeline. We've also got Community Care Northern Beaches that ostensibly is a clearinghouse for support services for those facing challenges with their elderly mum or dad who's got dementia and they're not quite sure of how to deal with it. I guess one of the key messages for people on businesses on the Northern Beaches is there is an absolute truckload of services out there that can help you. You got the stuff for building your resilience, but you've also got the stuff, the nuts and bolts, help me with this problem now. So that's the message. I mean, I don't think we could have landed in a better community to live in. I found it incredibly positive through my policing experience. You know, the local councillors were good, the state government reps were good. And then we had this great overlay of non-government and government providers of support services. Mate, we are blessed, and we got good views.
That is for sure. Now, I've certainly felt that way as well. I've spoken to a lot of people from all around the world and done lots of different workshops there, and they look at Australia as well, certainly initially, maybe not so flash with the rollout of the vaccine initially anyway.
No, we stopped that. That was a good one for Scotty, watching this, and there's a bit of squirming there.
Absolutely, we didn't absolutely nail that, but we seem to have got our, you know what, into gear now. In terms of there's some little polls just popped up. In terms of the business side of things, I see that you've turned your passion into, you know, your YouTube channels turned into millions of people watching it. Could you give people a bit of an understanding, not just of what you're doing, but how did you do it? And perhaps you might be able to give them some tips and tricks on how they can turn something they love into a business, because that's the key, isn't it? If you can never work a day in your life again but still be paid, that's awesome.
Well, let me start with the family. The family were completely non-supportive. A middle-aged bloke entering YouTube, Dad, you're mad, it's not going to work. So that supportive family I had when it came to technology, they just threw that out the door. But I had, I guess the first thing is you have to base it on passion, and I had two really clear passions. I love filming. Like when the kids were growing up, my mum bought me a video recorder when my daughter, who's now 32, was born. So it was a great big thing. And so I just started filming the kids. And then as they started doing stuff, my son is a good mountain bike rider, and I started filming that. And then I started filming action. And then one day someone came to the house and said, oh, you do a fairly good, you know, little sports movie. Why don't you put that on YouTube? And I said, what's YouTube? And so that was a hobby when I was in as a police commander. And, you know, I did a number of overseas trips and rode from London to Sydney and across Siberia and, all sorts of things. But then it gradually grew, and I think it's that enthusiasm and willingness to tell stories, and that's I see it as a venue to be able to tell stories. So passion is definitely there, and people can see through that. You're either really like what you do or you don't. And there's some other spin-offs that I like about it, like in terms of suicide prevention. I mean, the key age group, and it's not kind of widely known, but the people that most likely injure themselves are in fact from that age group of about 45 onwards, and as men. And you'd know that, Gus, with your work. And you know, that's an area that's particularly vulnerable, and adventure riding is an area that collects those sorts of people. So you meet lots of different people, and you know, some of them are very motivating, and others you can, or I can sense that they're probably a little bit vulnerable, and this is good for them to get out on a bike and just do the basics, you know, and cook bad food and sleep on the ground and all that sort of stuff.
So 135,000 subscribers, over 35 million views. Have the family turned around and said, actually, Dad, you've actually surprised us? Any love there now?
Well, it's interesting. I had to put in a tax return this year. And I said to my son, hey, buddy, this is, I call him Big Dog. And I said, Big Dog, this is what I earned this year. Went, wow, that's a good side earner. I said, thanks for the encouragement last time.
Yeah, well, you proved them wrong. I love that. And before we go to any Q&A, Dave, I would like to talk to you just briefly around that resilience point. Yeah. We've had emotions in the past 4 weeks, little poll come up, and people have been saying that they've been sort of some mental fatigue, 30%, depressed, sad or anxious, 0, which is great. 55% of people saying a few odd moments of feeling a bit emotional, and then nothing has changed, 15%. Okay. So thank you for filling that in. Just from your point of view, because I know a lot of coppers, I speak to a lot of coppers, a lot of mates of mine are coppers, and some of them are really vulnerable and they can sort of really shut off the work to the person. And others are like, I'm not starting. If you open me up, I'll never get back together again. And I've got 10 years to go. Okay. And I'll be vulnerable after that. I keep saying to them, lead with vulnerability. And I think you're someone that has done that. You've been able to be a commander, but also be a person that is vulnerable, but that doesn't mean you can't handle things. It doesn't mean you don't put the mask and the armor on and get on with it when you need to. That's that tricky sort of balance that we've got at the moment, is like people still feel, whether it's men, women, boys and girls, you still feel if you show emotion, it's still got that stigma attached that you are lesser than someone that doesn't, which of course we know is completely wrong. But how can we get people through that to get them to understand that?
Okay, I'm gonna start in some really basic ones. One of the most effective things I do for my mental health is walk. And preferably if you can walk with someone, walk and talk's even better. Yeah. But to go on a decent walk, I mean, you know, you don't have to go fast, but just go far, like 7Ks or 10Ks. So when you finish that walk, you feel physically tired. The other one is just change your diet ever so slowly, get a bit more meat and veg, get the right stuff into you, because those sugar highs and lows can affect you and bring you extra low when you're feeling vulnerable. So yeah, so anytime, even in the cops, what I used to do, I didn't drink. I never drank when I saw something horrible, like a family was wiped out in a car accident or something like that. I never ever, I took those emotions on, but I processed them with exercise. And the other thing I used to do, and a lot of police, I try to get them to understand what I do, because I'm one of the people who've been very fortunate to leave this job without injury, emotional injury. It doesn't mean I don't carry stuff with me, but I mean, I'm functioning and good. But when I'm at those really tough scenes, and I can think of particular ones now, what I try to do, because that intensity of that emotion at the time gets hardwired in your brain. So what I used to try to do is spin that at the time. So for example, I'm at an accident, there's someone trapped in a car, they've got their last breaths of life, and you're there watching that, and there's not much you can do. Well, there is actually things you can do. You can make sure that when you go to that loved one's family, that you do the best to give that sad news in the best way you can, and reassure the loved one that everything was done, and be satisfied in yourself that you did everything you could to get that come to a good conclusion when sometimes it just can't. The other thing is showing emotion. I mean, I'd be fair to say my command saw me tear up a few times, and there were particular things that touched me, and you know, it didn't bother me. It didn't bother me at all. And there's this, what I find is, and the other thing is to accept sometimes you can't control things, and like a reed, you're going to be knocked flat. You know, absolutely not flat. And you say you're not flat. You don't say, oh no, I'm fine, I'm a cop, you know, it's all good, because what happens, you're that little reed like a stick and you just snap. But the beauty of the reed is in the water, it just slowly comes back up. So yeah, there's a number of processes I did that I think helped me. I fell on my feet in terms of improving resilience in myself. And along the way tried to influence others to see those benefits. But at the end of the day, you can improve your emotional intelligence through courses and through talking to people. And that's the key out of this. Your IQ, you're stuffed. If you're down the bottom of the pile, you're on the bottom of the pile. But that doesn't mean you can't use your rat cunning, and it doesn't mean you can't improve your emotional intelligence.
Yeah. Absolutely right. And before I bring Kath in and bring Matt back in to host us in a Q&A, we've put up another poll. Do you know anyone that has signs of mental health issues that could use assistance? It's a simple choice underneath. Please just fill that in for us.
Just on that, I mean, I have a couple of mates who potentially could self-harm. And what these courses do is make you comfortable with asking the questions. Like the ones that you think, oh, well, I'd never say that. I'd never say that to my mate. Well, actually, when you talk honestly and you say, are you thinking about killing yourself? You know, and you put it in those terms, like I would have never done that 5 or 10 years ago. I would have never done that. But having those honest conversations and saying to people, and this is what blokes do, blokes don't say that they really value and appreciate each other. I really like being around you. You make me happy. Like, you got a crazy way of looking at the world, but you make me happy. You know
what I've been doing in the last couple of months is getting people in our chats to send a text message to someone in their village. So, you know, the village idea came to me. I went, okay, I'm going to get everyone to write that village down, spend a couple of minutes to do it. And hopefully people have done that this morning. You've got a pen and paper there and you've written down, you know, 10, 15 people, 5 people, whatever it might be. Give yourself a mark out of 10 for how you're performing within those relationships, and then go to work. If they're not a 7 or above out of 10, go to work. But the next thing is, and I'd love everyone to do this now as we settle ourselves in a Q&A, and you could do it too, Dave, off the back of what you've just said, because I agree with you, we're hopeless. Send a text message to someone you love and adore and say, I love you. And we're using the proper words, no emojis or anything. No. I love you. This is why I love you. And then give them the idea, and then send it. And you watch, men will ring each other up and go, what was that about? What are you sending me that message for? Is there something wrong? Because we never communicate in that way that's vulnerable and really ice-breaking with the connection. We just sort of let those things go through to the keeper. So we're trying to build a deeper set of relationships with the people that really matter to us. The mates you mean down the pub, you know, on a Saturday and you're having a punt with or something, of course, you don't need to send it to them. They're just mates that you have a beer with. We're talking about your village. That's the most important. So be vulnerable with them and they'll be vulnerable back to you.
Yeah. No, it's spot on.
Mental health early sign warning. People, maybe 40%. Yes, 35%, not really 25%. But please do that. Write down your village. Let them know that you're thinking about them, and send a text message to at least one of them now and let them know that you love them and this is why you love them. Kath, if you can come back on. Dave, thank you so much for giving us what you gave, and please stay for the Q&A. And I'll throw back to you, Matt, to start controlling the Q&A. And we're all here for you, myself, Dave, Matthew, and Kath, to answer any questions that you may have.
Hey, guys, thanks so much. It's just amazing. I've got a piece of paper here. I've scribbled so much stuff down. I don't know if any of it makes sense right now, but it did at the time when I scribbled it down. So appreciate that. But look, there are a few questions that have popped up, and I think one in particular came through, and I'm struggling with some of these, you know, technical side of things. But at the end of the day, I think They're asking Kath to say, one, everyone's phenomenal story. Really thanks for appreciate you sharing that story. Amazing. And, you know, sort of the resilience that has been built. But can you share with some of the helpful comments or support that people made to you, but also how we can sort of like, what are helpful comments or questions we can provide to people to get them on their journey and help them as they're feeling down? Because I think it's sometimes you can sort of listen, sometimes you want to give advice because you've got the answer, but what do you think it is that we can, you know, take from you to sort of say, this is what people want to hear, or this is what you need to ask?
Really good question. I don't think there's one, you know, phrase or statement that really stood out to me, but what I can share is, I guess the thing that resonated most with me when I was in my deepest struggle was actually consistency. Yeah. And what I mean by that is, I think when people go through a struggle or an adversity or a big life event, a lot of people get I'm hoping this makes sense, but they get quite flappy. They're not really sure how to act around you because you've been through such a big experience. And what that does to the person in the struggle is it goes, well, if you're uncomfortable with it, then maybe I need to be as well. And I'm going to just go in my shell and not talk about this then, because it's making you uncomfortable, and therefore I don't want to do that to you. And I think that the key there is staying consistent to who you are when you're supporting a person. So if you've always said that you love them, similar to what Gussie was just saying, or you've always been a certain way with that person, don't change that. Yeah. If you ask that person how they are and they say, you know, I'm okay, or you're not really convinced with the answer, dig a bit deeper. If you think that they're okay, and probably similar to what Dave was saying, but the physical expression of that isn't matching what they're saying, dig a bit deeper. But if you think that it matches up, then probably let them on their way. Sometimes we can be okay regardless of the struggle, and I think adversity affects us in different ways. So some of my bigger life adversities impacted me less than my lesser known ones, for example, and that could have just been that I was in a different phase of life or whatever that may have looked like. One of the things that I really didn't need to hear, it was when I got hit by that drunk driver and I was in that hospital bed, was I think they must have all been to the same news agency, but I had this stack of cards on my hospital bed, and about 6 of them read the same thing, and it just I don't know why it really irritated me. It said something like, God gives his strongest battles to his bravest soldiers, and it really got to me. So I'd say steer clear of that kind of stuff, the inspirational stuff, and just be you. And again, maybe someone would appreciate that, so you'll know best, and you'll know how to respond to that person, but just don't change who you are. Be authentic in that support. And just be consistently you would be my feedback there.
Okay, very great answer. And the next question, it's probably a question in regards to the village concept, Gus, is that I suppose the village is great, and I know a friend of mine that went through a depression and came out of that, but a lot of people think, I'm not going to get it, I'm not going to be affected by mental health, and it's not me. And I think Dave and you both mentioned it, but how do we get people to open up? I know I wasn't one. As soon as someone says, how are you? The automatic response is, I'm great. And you go, oh, I'm great. And everyone's great. And all of a sudden you walk away going, I'm not great, but I said I was great. You know, and it's like, how do you get people to say, I'm not great? And, you know, it's not, the village is there ready to help you. And we've all got people and friends and families that are willing to do it. But unless, I suppose, you're willing to say, I'm not great, and I do need some help, the village can't sort of step in. So is there any signs or tips or ways of trying to encourage people to open up?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple of different things there. The village concept's about you and making sure that you know who your people are. And then you reach out to them and let them know that you love them and that you care for them. And this is why you love them so much. That village is a list of people that you love and adore, and you cannot imagine living your world without. So like you say, that is your own individual list. Your wife would have a list with a few people the same on it if you've got children, and hopefully you're on her list, that type of stuff, right? So that's really key. So that's the first thing. And then show vulnerability and lead with vulnerability, like Dave and I have been speaking about, is the fact if you lead with vulnerability, then you actually show your village that it's okay to be yourself. It's okay to be authentic. It's okay to show emotion. It's okay to take your mask off and your armor off with these set of people. So all of a sudden you're setting up a very different way of dealing with these people than you have in the past. But it takes time. You can't just snap your fingers and go, you know what, I've got this nailed. That's why I talk about, and we talk about at Gotcha for Life, mental fitness rather than mental health, because mental health tends to take you, unfortunately, because it's been stigmatized, down to the bottom of the barrel. That's someone else's issue. That's someone else has got those problems. He's a crazy man. He's got to be all that stuff, you know, stuff we see in the movies and so forth. If you talk about mental fitness, it's just like your physical fitness. You have things to work on. There are days where you are a 10 out of 10. There's days where you're injured and you can't get off the sofa. That's exactly what mental fitness is all about. So if we talk mental fitness, it's something that we can exercise, practice, get better at. And slowly but surely, you will find those set of people that you can actually talk to with being authentic with them and tell them the truth. Because like you say, the biggest thing a bloke can do in particular is go, I'm fine. And then we just leave it. I'm not copping that anymore. It's asking the second and the third questions. It's making sure that I'm really invested. And if you don't like me answering the questions, well, I'm only asking because I love you and I'm worried about you. It builds a better relationship if you are a little bit more open to being vulnerable.
Yeah, well, great answer. And I think that's probably one of the hurdles that you get from people is that it's hard to sometimes just put your feelings out.
Of course it is. It's hard to go run a marathon. It's hard to go and do if you go and get physically fit to do an event, it's going to take time. You're going to get injured. You're going to have times where you're shouting at your personal trainer, where you're eating stuff you're not meant to eat, you're drinking stuff. It's all through this process, but it's about being human. It's about understanding that we are going to fail. We're going to have a crack. We're going to get back up again. We should just be open to being vulnerable. It doesn't mean we're not hardworking. It doesn't mean we're not resilient, but it means that we are actually human, which means things won't always go our way and we need to dust ourselves off. But it's so much better to do it if you're in a village rather than by yourself.
Great comments. And Dave, a question sort of come through for you to sort of ask, how can the council and our community further support, say, first responders? But then on top of that, how do we then, during this tough time, but also how do we, how can council and how can community and how can people support everybody around there? Because there's people out there, I suppose, family businesses that are out there, and it's mums and dads who are doing the books together and looking, go, well, how do we get through this and how do we do that? And they're raising a family. And what are things that could be done or can be done or they're available now that are people can jump in on?
Yeah, well, the first thing is what are first responders? There's ambulance, police, fireys. That's the typical kind of everyone goes to, but there's a lot of other people who are first responders in the community who are accidental first responders who are dealing with a close family relative in a crisis. The first thing we can do, I think, is to recognise that Northern Beaches has a whole range of very strong, a network of services that are probably, of all the local government areas in Australia, be one of the strongest in terms of that network, be it voluntary or or government. So that's the first one. There is always someone there to help you. Lifeline can refer, Community Care Northern Beaches can refer and hook you up to the right services, and also the Department of Health. But so that's the first one is, if it's beyond you, there are things there that you can reach out to now, services really close, nearly at hand to you. And I think that's the most important thing. And you're not alone. I mean, that's the one that really, for me. And the second part is you can practically build the resilience of your family. These courses that I've mentioned, I mean, basically they're just sitting down and enlightening you about a different way of thinking. They don't take long. Some of them are only 4 hours. Some of them are 8, but some of them are 4 hours. And those courses just help you on that journey of not only your own awareness, but awareness of others. Yep. So they're two really practical things. I mean, for businesses at the moment, I would imagine like they are thinking, my God, I've got to get out of COVID. I've got to get on my feet. And they're like little isolated units. And this is the thing I love about what Gus and Kath were talking about the village. But in terms of some of those need specialist help. So financial counselling is available free of service from Lifeline. Yeah. Like what a time to use that. So I know this service has been a lot of people are turning to their service because they give a good service.
Yeah, and look, great response. And I think one of the things from a small business point of view, everyone says, you've got to get financial this, you've got to do that. And a lot of people just see numbers ticking up that it's going to cost me this, it's going to cost me that, which they don't have. So great advice. And so I'll throw this one here to Kath. And someone's asked just how much does uncertainty play into mental health struggles? Because I think great question for you that, you know, when you're going through rehab and you're doing all that, you're uncertain with maybe where you're going to get to, how much recovery you're going to get. Where does that play into mental health? And is there any tips about dealing or feeling a bit more comfortable with uncertainty?
Yeah, I would say there's two things that are probably significantly impacting the mental health of a lot of people. One is that uncertainty. So COVID's been a huge example of that. And as you said, similar, like my life has had a lot of that in it, and it just creates ambiguity and lots of guessing and what ifs and all those sorts of things, which can tend to really drag you down. The other thing is obviously financial hardship, people worrying about how they're going to pay bills and all those sorts of things. So add in both of these things that everyone seems to be experiencing at the moment. It's a tough time, and maybe it's just an acknowledgement to anyone who's listening to this, like, sit back and go, wow, I'm here today and I've survived this. And it's been one of the biggest things that's happened in world history in a very long time, that's impacted all of us in very unique and different ways. So acknowledge that, everyone, and be really proud of yourself for that, for actually getting through it, and thank you for getting through it as well. How to sort of overcome that, the biggest tip or the best tip I can give anyone is, in any challenge that we're facing, is certainly like things like uncertainty and ambiguity. Sometimes when you break it down into the smallest possible pieces that you can, the easier it becomes. So if I'm trying to get out of this struggle and I see the end game here, what are the steps that I'm going to take to get there? So when it was walking, it was like, today, all I need to do is take 2 steps. I know that that's a long way off me independently walking, but if I can just take 2 today, and then the next day I might take 4, and the next day I might take 8, I know that it's not breaking world records, but it's taking me 2 steps closer to where I was, from where I was yesterday. And I think in all of this, if it's reopening a business, it might be that I just clean my shop front up today, and then tomorrow I might get the tills ready, or whatever it is, whatever the business sort of that you're in looks like. And it could be something online, so it might just be reigniting online or IT systems and all those sorts of things. So take those small steps to really climb yourself out of that. The ambiguity and uncertainty, I think, is probably my biggest tip.
Great. I agree that when you do break things down, sometimes it's a lot easier to deal with. So that's a great thing, because you look at your desk and you're like, I've got so much to do and I've got all these things. But when you actually just put it in a pile and go, I'm going to go one by one, you actually just, you start getting through it, and you feel that sense of accomplishment. So you actually feel better from that point of view as well. And a question has come through, I'll throw to Gus, I suppose, is in regards to any tips for, I suppose, business owners that are dealing with staff that are going to be coming back in after a long time out, going to feel uncertain, they're going to have different emotions. How can they be settled in? Is there something that you would suggest or recommend that they do to make it a bit easier for people to get back to work?
Yeah, totally. I mean, be honest with them, I think, is probably the most important thing. Kids are clever, kids know stuff, they're connected. And if you just say to them, look, you know, this is what our plan is, make them a part of the plan. Let them know that this is what we're trying to do. These are the most important things. Don't just treat them like perhaps we were treated when we were youngsters doing our first job. Certainly at Shilwarunga there, when I was doing my stuff, it was like, get behind the till, do your job, run out there, put the oil in the thing, do this and that. I was not a part of that business, and that was fine, but that was the way that it was. I think these days kids love to be sort of brought in, especially the right type of kids that are hopefully working for you, and let them know that there is great uncertainty at the moment, but we are absolutely going to be busting our asses to do whatever we can do, and we all want to be a part of this. So investing them in your business, I think, is a really, not money-wise, but just with the way that you talk to them and the way that you make them a part of it. That's a really key thing. And also understand that, like Kath said, you know, my daughter's doing HSC at Freshwater at the moment. She hasn't been to school this year, hardly. Yeah. She hardly went to school in year 11, and she loves that school after having a really difficult experience at another school. And it spoilt her childhood to a certain degree. And now she's lost 2 deposits on her schoolies, and she wants to do this and that, but she still has to do the HSC, which is the big thing. So there's a lot going on in these kids' heads, and you've got to understand that. You've got to, I suppose, at the end of the day, take off our old school hats and understand that, listen to them, take the time to be patient with them, and actually invest in their way of thinking, because they are different to how we were brought up. So just do that the best you possibly can. And if you've got good staff, they will really adapt to that and go, you know what, I'm a part of something here. I'm a part of the rebuild. And then, you know, if you can and things are going well, give them an extra $20 or something and let them know how much you appreciate them. Show a bit of vulnerability and let them know. I think that's how I'd be doing it anyway.
Just adding to what Gus was saying, this generation is very different. And if I had a message that I learned from those, you know, the young police now in their 23s, early 20s, is craft your response to the person. So some people appreciate being told very in a directive sense, this is what I want you to do. This has to be done by 9 o'clock. This has to be done. But those that show initiative, and this generation is more likely to show initiative and like to be recognised verbally in a very positive way for thinking creatively, for adding. And you'll find if you let them go and don't hold the reins on them, they will take your business to another level. Yes, there will be some staff who don't think like that, but I guess from that emotional intelligence point of view, it's about working out how to get the most from that staff member. And if you tune your response right, you will get 3 times as much out of that young staff member. And it'll end up probably running the business for you, and you'll be sucking pina coladas at the beach and they'll have the business running for you. And isn't that what you want? Don't you want to be redundant? You know, I think that's, it's an important part, but just to just have a one top fits all response to young people these days, it's not useful.
It's hard.
I agree. And look, we've unfortunately we've come to the end. It's 9 o'clock, so we'll people got places to go and things to do. And I just want to say, look, huge thanks to Gus for hosting, Kath for sharing a story, and for Dave giving us your, I suppose, knowledge that you've got in regards to, you know, how we move forward. And I really want to thank you for your time. And for everyone out there, look, go and log on to, you know, sort of check out Gotcha for Life and buy some merch. I thought you might be wearing some today, Gus, that people might want to get. Oh, there we go. The model, Gus is modeling for us. So, but donate, sign up to the newsletter. Same with Kath. I think, you know, jump on the website, log an act of kindness, which would be great. And let's get that number to 3 million. What are we at? 2879. Let's get it to 3 million and beyond. So look, appreciate that. And then Dave, you got 100,000 subscribers. If you love motorbike riding or just want to watch Dave talk, then jump on, have a look at it, and you know, sort of, and ride if you can, if you want to. But if you're not riding and you want to experience it through Dave's eyes, then jump on by all means. But thank you all so much. Appreciate it, and have a great day. And we'll talk soon. See you later, guys.
See you guys.
Thank you. See you later. Bye.